This is Tales from the Pros, where business leaders and influencers share their stories of inspiration, struggles, and successes. And I'm your host, Michael Giorgio. Hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to Tales from the Pros. This is Michael Giorgio, your host and co-founder of Anjunabeats. I have an awesome guest with me today. His name is James Kaiser, or as you all know him in the electronic music scene as Jaytech. Jaytech, should I call you Jaytech or James? What do you actually like better?
Well, my friends call me Jimbo, so Jimbo, we can roll with that. Yeah.
Cool. So you get people calling you different names, or is it just always Jimbo?
So I've been stuck with Jimbo since I was about 14 years old. My dad calls me Jay, which I think is where Jaytech came from. But yeah, like any of those variations is fine, you know. So I'm pretty used to it. So
cool. So James, originally from Australia, Canberra, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So yeah, you really made your name playing in progressive music to the trance crowd. And I know you've been a warm-up DJ of choice for Anjunabeats, which is a huge record label. Above and Beyond is under that record label. They're the leader of it, actually. And you've been playing in iconic venues around the world, including Hollywood Palladium and the Brixton Academy in London. You've also been a seasoned DJ, playing in clubs in all corners of the world, visiting nearly every festival you could ever imagine, including EDC in Vegas, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, Tomorrowland in Belgium, and the Electric Zoo in New York City. And also, what's pretty amazing about James is your Anjunadeep 02 and Anjunadeep 03 compilations were both reached #1 on the US iTunes Dance Albums chart. Wow, man, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's been a crazy ride, you know, and it all began when I was basically 14 years old. I was doing this kind of musical path ever since I was a kid, playing piano and that kind of thing. And then, yeah, it was basically like when I was 14 years old, I went to this all ages rave party in my hometown, and it's just I was mesmerized by these DJs, and it's just set me on this crazy path that is still going to this day.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Like, and first of all, James, I want to just say thank you. I'm truly humbled for you to take the time out of your busy, crazy schedule. I know right now you're in Portland. You have a show tonight. And I just want to thank you for being on my podcast, man. I really appreciate it. So I can't wait for you to share your story on how you really got to where you are today. And as I told you in the when we just spoke before this, that I've been listening to your music since the early 2000s, and me and my brother are huge fans in just trance music, electronic, and house. And I remember you mixing it up with some of the world's best, like Above and Beyond, who I mentioned, Boom Jinx, Steve Smith, Super 8. I mean, it's outrageous, just these amazing artists that you've collaborated with. And that's why I reached out to you. I think, I consider you a leader in your industry, and that's really why I wanted to talk about your journey, man. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. So James, or Jimbo, so just kind of kick things off here. I want to talk about your journey as a DJ and a music producer. I know you started when you were 14 years old. So you started talking a little bit about that. Tell me more about that. How did you really, what inspired you to do this?
Well, like I said, I grew up with a sort of musical background. I think my mum and my auntie sort of started teaching me piano when I was about 5, and they would say stuff like, "You're going to write music for films one day," or "You're going to," they were always telling me that you're going to be this great musician. And I think that sort of, it's this kind of like neuro-linguistic programming, or just like this kind of constantly reinforcing this idea that this is what you're good at. I think it actually sort of stuck at some point. And I also grew up with computers. I was, as most people of my generation have, I was sort of, I was glued to like video games and then the internet when the internet came around. And so it wasn't long before I sort of connected those two dots and started making music with computers. And it was a really interesting time where people kind of scoffed at the idea, because back then it was about buying, a studio full of analog gear with all these crazy synthesizers and hardware compressors, and everything is literally being sequenced on a big metal box with flashing buttons and stuff.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
then, along came these kind of initial rudimentary computer programs that did all this stuff for you and streamlined the process quite considerably. And at first, people thought it was ridiculous, and people always scoff at new technology when it comes along and replaces old-fashioned things. So I had a pair of hi-fi speakers in my bedroom, and I was still in school.
Yeah.
And between all of my sort of classes and the homework that I should have been doing, but probably wasn't, I was messing around with beats, and I think it was very puzzling to my parents at first, and they were sort of like, "Where is this going? This is this is quite strange behavior." I think.
Were they kind of concerned with you though? Were they kind of like, man, I hope this guy doesn't get into the music industry? Because you always hear, at least I always hear all these rumors that it's just crazy being it's so tough. The music industry is very cutthroat, right? It's just very tough to even just try to dabble into it.
You know what? I think at that stage, firstly, that hadn't even occurred to me because I think when I was 16, I was quite starry-eyed and assumed that, you become a musician and then, you write a track and somebody notices it and sets up this magical career for you, which does happen sometimes, But I think for my parents, I think the idea of doing a music career was actually, that was something I think they always thought I was going to do. And in fact, I think a recording career and a career in modern music is much more likely to be successful than if you're doing something like classical music. We had other members of the family who had taken that route and had, been doing performance piano and stuff. And that's, I think, a much more difficult world, actually, because I think in the realms of traditional music, you have to be the absolute best or you go home. It's sort of like going for gold in the Olympics, it's that kind of level of risk, So I think they weren't particularly worried about that. And to their credit, they basically said to me, we'll let you, they sort of cut me a deal, which was, they said, we've worked quite hard to send you to this nice private school in in my hometown in Australia.
Oh my God.
And we would love it if you could like apply yourself and just get through it. And, and like, we'll of course let you like nourish this interest that you have. Mm-hmm. So they certainly never tried to stop me from doing it. And like, I did sort of, get through school because by my last year of high school, I was so ready to be in this world. I think I'd already signed my first track by the time I was in the 12th grade. And
wow.
So, I was getting into this scene, before I'd even left school. And so, yeah, it is an interesting, I'm sure it must be interesting for parents to sort of to have their children discover this kind of thing. But I think it's a testament to the fact that, if it's something your child is passionate about, then, they have to explore it. They have to explore it to the fullest extent. So, yeah. So as soon as I finished school, I was just like 100% into this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Started touring, I think my first international gig was in Japan, and they sort of said, we want to bring you to Tokyo and we want you to play a live show rather than DJing. And so I spent all this time putting together this live show, which I played at this amazing club in Tokyo called Ageha. And I must have been like 19 or 20 years old or something, by that stage, Oh yeah, and I'd done a couple of South American tours with a fellow DJ from Australia, Matt Rowan. And so yeah, it was this really crazy time, sort of taking flight from Australia and starting to get out into the world. And it was just this time of me being a teenager and partying lots with my friends and just getting my music played on radio shows. And, I would release a track and, I'd have sort of DJs from overseas writing me and being like, we played this track to like 12,000 people at a festival, and so I had all this good news rolling in all the time. It was this very exciting time, of just like steadily releasing music and getting the whole world to sort of take notice of it,
So you kind of felt like it was meant to be. You felt, I know you talked about since you were a kid, you were always super passionate. You had kind of all these, you have experience in piano. I remember, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. So with that being said, and your kind of experience with electronics, like the computer tools and synthesizers, all those kinds of things, it was just, and along with your passion for music, you kind of felt like this is really what you wanted to do as a kid. Because later, you always hear these stories, right, about Actually, even my sister is kind of like this. I hate to say it. She's going to listen to this. She's going to hate me for telling people this. But even my sister, it took her so long to really find out what she wanted to do. You know what I mean? I still don't even know if she knows what she wants to do. And that's the thing is, you're kind of like me. When you were a kid, you always had this passion for something, and you actually executed it, and you just stayed with it, and you stayed consistent with it. And that's what I want you to kind of talk about is what was it like for you to break through that noise and clutter in such a competitive industry? Because even here in North Carolina, there's so many aspiring DJs in all different music scenes. So what led you to, how did you actually break through that clutter to brand yourself, to travel around the world, to perform, you know?
I think I had a very one-track mind as far as my future was concerned. I only did well in 2 subjects in school, which is music and German, and I ended up being a musician living in Germany for 6 years. So I guess that worked out. So I think, I think maybe a lot of people in life, when it comes to the skills that they learn and the passions that they have, they cast a very wide net that can be somewhat shallow, whereas I was very narrow and deep. I had these very specific things that I was into, these very specific things that I was good at. And I think just the drive to, just to keep doing that. And when I was 14, I was incredibly lucky to have this idea of how to live like my life just hit me out of left field. It was like a smack in the face of like, here is a path, here is like a destiny to follow, and I think that just coupled with the belief that I could sort of take on the world, I think, I would play like this music was honestly like before I was releasing records, like some of the music I was writing, I listen to it now and by today's standards, it's rubbish, it's terrible, but I was playing it to people back then and people were like, this is really going to go places. Like this is going to be great. So I always had people saying this to me, And so I always had my eyes just set on taking over the whole world,
You had that reassurance. People, you don't have, you probably got brought up the same way I did, right? In terms of like, you don't want to brag about yourself, but if people are bragging about you and saying good things about you without you even kind of being cocky or even overconfident, people are talking about you, which that, for me at least, that's a sign that you're doing things right. If people are bragging about you, that's another sign that, man, maybe I really need to pursue this,
Yeah, and so that was basically just sort of building and building. I started a record label of my own for a while, and so initially that was called Red 7 Records, and we're talking like vinyl releases, like this is old school. So this is another thing is people were also scoffing at the idea of playing DJing off CDs back then. They were like, if you're not playing off vinyl, then you're not a real DJ. Which obviously went out the window after a while. But basically we were releasing records for a while. The distributor went bust, and sort of a whole, like a ton of labels all got wiped out at the same time because this distributor basically just like went bankrupt overnight and disappeared. And and so the last release that I put out myself, I think James Grant from Anjunabeats / Anjunadeep.
He's like one of the founders of the label, right?
So he's the brother of John O'Grant, who's 1/3 of Above and Beyond, and he's also basically Above and Beyond management and head honcho of Anjunadeep. And so he got in touch sort of on behalf of Anjunadeep back in 2007, and he said, what's the deal with this latest track that you're putting out? We really like it. Can we release it? And I sort of said, well, it's already kind of in the release schedule, and it's our hands are tied with it. It's kind of already coming out on vinyl and stuff. And he said, well, if we can't release it, we'll help you promote it because we think it's really cool. And so they included it on, I think it was Above and Beyond's Anjunabeats. I should really know this. Anjunabeats Volume 5, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so it was the final track from this label that had just basically got wiped out. And so and that was the first sort of Anjunabeats appearance that I had. And then later that year, they invited me to come to India to open for them at the Sunburn Festival in Goa. So that was the first time I ever went to India. And I met the whole team. Everyone was there putting on this, this big Anjunabeats party, as they are well known to do.
Right.
And so I met everyone, and we kept in contact, and I started releasing music with them. And they sort of said, well, if you came over to the UK, we can help you get set up. You can come work in our studios, you can. And so, that was kind of that was the start of it. I went to the UK when I was 22 years old, and the rest is history. That was basically 10 years ago now.
And that kicked off your career, right? That Anjunabeats, signing with the Anjunabeats label, which is one of the biggest in the world, that's really what kicked things off for you, right?
Yeah. But it was also a time when they were really sort of very interested and focused on the undiscovered artists. And I think to this day they still are. These records that perhaps deserve to be in the spotlight but haven't been discovered yet. And I think that's been something that's been very exciting for me as well. Like I run a monthly radio show and podcast where basically I'm just trying to unearth artists all the time. So we get sent a ton of music from these up and coming producers, and and by sort of putting the spotlight on them in my podcast, either as guest mixes or just playing their music, it helps give them a leg up into the industry as well. Because like you said, it is about a lot of people crying out to have their music heard, and to have a platform for it to be heard. So that's basically been the dream ever since. And it's still going to this day.
That's amazing. That's cool. And I read your story about, I remember you're talking about Goa, India. So Anjuna, you said is a beach. Is that how they kind of came up with the Anjunabeats name? That's pretty cool.
I think so. Yeah. And the logo is actually a wingding. It's part of the wingdings font that they've just adjusted a little bit. So you actually do see the Anjuna logo, that ribbon, that iconic ribbon logo. You see it in other people's logos every now and then, because it's from the wingdings font.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So backtrack a little bit here. So you started when you're 14 years old. You found a lot of, obviously you had a passion for music, electronic music. It seems like you were pretty savvy with computers as well, and you had experience with piano, and that helped with you creating your own songs and things like that. And then, so with that being said, aside of your passion, do you feel that it was a lot of being at the right place at the right time, and with consistency over time, that's how you got your opportunity at Anjunabeats? Because I want aspiring DJs and producers to really know the steps that you took to signing with that label,
So I think intention is a very important part of it, right? Because if you spend your whole life intending to do something and working on it, you are going to have some lucky breaks at some point, and you're going to have some unlucky ones as well.
I agree.
So a similar question has been asked of a bunch of artists, and I know a lot of artists in this industry get sort of, the question comes up were you in the right place at the right time? Is there an element of luck to this? Absolutely. Yeah. But conversely, you can have a music career as long as you're prepared to have one, and as long as you're prepared to be in the game and to keep working at it, you're going to have a career. That's the definition of it, So, I've never liked the idea of winning anything by chance. It's never been particularly exciting for me. So I think, I think the getting noticed in the first place, it was still the product of years of trying to figure this music out and, working really hard on it and developing my own sound. And I think it ultimately comes down to, developing yourself as a person, and then your music reflects in that. So,
and being unique, your music was unique in the sense you had this progressive type trance, emotion that had a lot of emotion in your beats as well, right?
Yeah, and I think something that actually helped me was the fact that everything I did was experimental and by trial and error. I was using weird software, and there was certainly no guidebook for this kind of thing back then. There were no tutorials on how to do anything because it was all so new, and it wasn't being taken quite seriously. And so I think that kind of gave me a bit of a leg up, because I wasn't coming at music from such a traditional standpoint, to that end, writing very traditional sounding records is not my forte at all, So yeah, I think it's being uniquely yourself and being yourself to the fullest extent that you can, I think is the best way forward.
Right. No, I completely agree. I think that's, James, I think that's really, not just business, or I think that's being your own person in general. If you want to be successful and achieve goals and have an amazing career in what you want to do, what you're passionate about. I think it's a lot about trial and error. I completely agree with you. It's even the same with me and my company and being in tech and even in this podcast. I think it's a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of consistency. And I think being at the right place at the right time does play a role into it. But I really like what you said about it's not only that. I think, like you said, it's really just being unique and having the skill set to offer value to your audience, right? And then people loving what you do. And it seems like that's what, I've heard your music for years, and there definitely was something different about it. It gave you this emotion, just this peaceful emotion when you listen to it. It didn't make you want to go crazy. It was just a very nice, just soothing music, at least for me. And I think that played a huge role in you being unique, correct?
I would think so, yeah. I was always kind of the like you said before, like it was the progressive music for the trance crowd. So I think like for me, from like a progressive house, and for people who aren't familiar, progressive house is kind of like it's taking house music and making it like more melodic and more storytelling and a bit more cerebral.
Yes.
And then trance is faster and more pumping and makes you want to jump up and down and lose your mind. So that's the kind of difference, And so although I was always like a progressive house artist, I because of this sort of the entry point into this world that I had, I was finding throughout my whole 20s, I was finding myself at trance parties all around the world. And so, I was playing this music that to me is kind of like as rocking and pumping as I want it to be. But then, after that, after that, it sort of turns into trance. And so I just found this great little niche where I was kind of doing what I wanted to do to the fullest extent. And then it was such a fun time of night to play because it's getting the crowd warmed up. And by the time I'm finished, everyone's super excited for the trance,
Yeah. Yeah. You adapted to the trends. It was kind of first progressive and house, and then now it's then it kind of you evolved into more of the trance type music, and then as you see now, there's a lot of this. Is it dubstep? There's all these dubstep artists now. It's so fast paced. It's crazy.
Yeah, I would say it's sort of evolved from dubstep into trap, and what you're seeing now is that all of these terms are actually kind of disappearing. Like there's like synth wave and like there's all this, some of these like tropical house and future house and like some of these genres I don't even like know what it is. But I think what's changing a bit is that I think nowadays that's all these borders between the types of music are dissolving a little bit, and you can just really write whatever you want. Which once again comes back to, you're writing yourself. The music that you're putting out is the sound of you. And so it doesn't have to adhere so much to kind of preconceived guidelines like it used to.
That's cool. So Anjunabeats allows you to be more creative, all right, as an artist. They don't tell you this is exactly what you play, or you think it's kind of a mix of both?
So there are still definitely some frameworks.
Yeah.
Basically because Anjunabeats has such a characteristic sound. And so I think with Anjunabeats, the creative freedom to do any kind of style you want comes when you're releasing an album. If you're doing a single, there is a necessity just to achieve a certain effect on the dance floor, which does sort of, I mean, I don't want to say limits, but it provides a framework that works really well,
Makes sense. Yep.
And so, this is actually sort of where the starting point of my label, Positronic, which runs alongside the releases that I do on Anjunabeats. It's this great little sort of underground label that harkens back to the days of early Anjunadeep and sort of carrying that sound into the future and basically peppering sort of the Anjunabeat between the Anjunabeats releases that I come out, which is sort of nowadays more on the trancey side. Positronic, I started to actually to be a platform for whatever kind of underground stuff that I feel like, because the music, especially when you work with a label for so long, the music that you do doesn't always fit in with the fan base that they have. There are these different circles. You've got your fan base, you as an artist, you've got your labels fan base that are into that label's sound. And so Positronic basically was a way for me to put out all the music around what I was already doing, a way to sort of branch out and diversify a little bit. So I did my third album myself, and that was basically just to see if I could do it, and it worked out really well. And yeah, so now it's about sort of, yeah, just a platform for me to do whatever I feel like in a much more relaxed setting where the stakes aren't as high, you know, like there's room for something to be a little more underground and a little bit like, you know, more whatever I feel like doing, like a passion project or anything like that. I am about to release some like 110 BPM stuff on the label, which is slower than this entire world. You know, house music, trance music is like 128 to 138, or even 124 to 138. So 110 BPM stuff is, once again, it's this new emerging kind of sound that people are doing that doesn't fit into anything. So yeah, so I was doing this sort of more major label type stuff for basically a decade, and now I'm sort of starting to branch out a bit and do sort of this more indie underground thing, which is my little sort of entrepreneurial passion project. So that's been a lot of fun.
Perfect. And we're definitely we're gonna talk a little bit about Positronic later and that kind of venture. But when we were talking about you collaborating with other artists, I know we mentioned Above and Beyond, as I'm sure everyone's heard of them. They're pretty amazing. Does Anjunabeats, do they basically partner you up with them? Like, do they kind of connect both of you, or you and any other artist per se, not just Above and Beyond, but any other artist? Do they connect you guys together to do like a single or whatever it is, or do you choose them? I just want to I want people to understand the flexibility that some of these labels give their artists and such.
So I mean, Above and Beyond basically started the whole Anjunabeats thing. So it was them sort of all out and expressing interest in my music in the first place. Yeah. And so yeah, they definitely very much came and found me. You know, there was and to be honest with you, I'd somehow kind of missed the memo with Above and Beyond. I was a Trance fan, and I'd been listening to like Paul Oakenfold and Paul Van Dyke and stuff.
But somehow, I know them, Paul Oakenfold.
Yeah,
oh man,
who were all these iconic trance artists back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. But somehow I had never really come across Above and Beyond. It had never really, they had just never been on my radar. So I think when they reached out, I was like, okay, this sounds fun. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've gotten to know them like a lot better over the last 10 years and their sound. And it's, and it's great what they do, because they do sort of unearth these new artists and they give them a platform. Without them, I would never have been able to play in front of like such big crowds. Like the first time I came to the United States was for a huge tour, we were on like a tour bus.
Yeah.
We were playing in like basically like the best venues that you can play in. And so like my first experience of being in the US back in 2008 was seeing all of these like big cities, seeing them at their best as part of this huge traveling party. So
that's amazing.
That is, I am definitely very lucky to have been able to do that.
What's the largest audience you've ever played in front of?
I would say to be about 20,000 people.
Jeez. Wow.
And that's only been sort of a few times here and there. And then, definitely like a lot of those Above and Beyond shows, they were sort of 10,000 plus people, because they do draw quite a big crowd,
Oh yeah.
And so it's pretty electric being able to sort of play. By the time I'm finishing my set, I usually do some sort of crazy outro or some sort of dramatic ending to the set, and then you have this sort of 2 minutes of 10,000 people all going absolutely crazy. They're at this sort of peak of like being ready to party.
That is insane.
Yeah, so but I guess I don't even really think about it anymore, like, because I was doing all these intense like piano competitions when I was young, where you're not allowed to get anything wrong. You're playing in front of people and you have to get everything right, and it's really intense. Whereas in the DJ world, you can accidentally kill the music and everyone will just laugh. And
they don't care. Yeah, it's a different audience.
And if that ever happens, and I've seen everybody do it, and if it happens, like I know exactly what I need to do to get the music going again. And if the whole sound system like fails me and breaks down, then that's not really my problem. So I'm emotionally detached from it now. I have no problem playing in front of any size crowd, and I think that's why it worked so well, is because a lot of these nights, sometimes I'd be starting to play at 9 p.m. and there was nobody there, and I think I would still be happy to just have a great time, even if nobody else is warmed up yet. I'd be up there having a good time, and So yeah, it's always been a very relaxed environment, and I think that's why it worked, because I was able to sort of get other people to let their hair down a little bit and get into the groove of things.
I can't even imagine how tired you get when you're playing until probably 4 or 5 in the morning, right? Or even more. I mean, I've been around the world, man. I'll tell you, it's so different here on the East Coast. A lot of clubs they'll finish at 2 o'clock, but in Europe or South America or Asia, you're talking about 5, 6, 7 a.m.
Yeah, and it used to be like that in Australia too, and I used to love staying up all night partying, but now it's like, give me a great like 2 hour set, even like a 3 hour set, and that finishes at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I think that's great, like
Yeah.
I'm not as into staying up all night as I used to be.
Man, that's cool. And so I got to ask you this question: what's it like opening for Above and Beyond? I mean, did you ever think? I know you said you didn't know them much before before you really got in the scene, but when you actually saw how big they're gonna, or how huge they were, and they're even bigger now, did you ever see yourself playing with such like a top artist? You know what I mean? Was it just shock of the moment type thing? And that's the thing. Like it's crazy how these moments in life they're so unexpected. Some things have happened in my life. It's just so unexpected that I couldn't believe it. It was such a blessing it happened in my life. I was like, wow, I really, really couldn't believe it. But with you performing with them, did you ever see yourself doing that? Or did you have, you were this, this young aspiring DJ when you started when you were 14, and you knew that you were good at what you're going to do, and you knew that was your passion, but did you ever think you were going to go so far?
Well, I always wanted to light the world on fire. I always wanted to really, really, have an impact, and that's something I still sort of strive for, like, to this day.
Yeah.
But it was definitely overwhelming at first. Like, doing some of these tours to begin with, it was like, I think at the height of it, we were doing like 6 shows a week. There was like for their second album tour, we did 6 weeks of 6 shows a week, so it was like 36 cities. And yeah, that's really intense. Like there are some cities that we went and played in that I can't even remember going to them. Like I don't know. It's like I didn't commit it to memory because it was such a blur. So yeah, but they're such down to earth guys. I think they've got such a sense of humor about everything behind the scenes. And they're really, really consummate professionals at what they do. And so yeah, I learned a lot from them about, having like a well-oiled machine and making a show go off without a hitch, and just adapting to whatever weird circumstances rise, like the time Jono fell through a hole in the stage, or, because I think a gig is never exactly how you expect it to be. You prepare for a show, and then when you get there, it's just a different atmosphere every time. It's a different shape of room every time, which makes a huge difference to the vibe. Opening DJs, closing DJs. Sometimes they're amazing. Sometimes they're terrible. Sometimes they have no concept of, keeping it like somewhat chilled out at the start of the night. Sometimes they're just turning it up to 11 from the moment of the doors opening. So yeah, it's kind of chaos, but I think you learn to sort of roll with it, and it becomes organized chaos, and then it's not so bad. Yeah,
and that's amazing how you had, Above and Beyond kind of, it seems like they mentored you. They showed you, obviously you had a lot of experience before them as well. You traveled around the world before you even signed with the label, but it seems like you kind of found your mentor. A lot of, if you notice, a lot of successful leaders around the world, they have a mentor, and it seems like Above and Beyond was kind of your mentor, and they gave you a lot of guidance, and I think that I'm sure you can agree that helped you to get to where you are today, along with your uniqueness and your sounds and your kind of entrepreneurial spirit as well.
Absolutely, because like it doesn't matter how bright a spark you are. If you're in your early 20s, somebody who is over 30 is going to be able to look at what you're doing and say, here's a dozen ways that you can do it better. So definitely, I lived with Jono for a year when I was based in London, and so obviously, we were nerding out a lot, and he taught me a lot about red wine and the best ones to drink and stuff like that. And, and a lot about music as well. Lots of sort of theological discussions about music, and also I think one of the other real benefits I had was living in the UK. It was the first time I got to work in a really nice studio, because up until then I've been doing sort of bedroom everything.
Yeah.
And then, there were like, outside of like business hours, if nobody's using the studio, you can use it, and they'd be off on tour somewhere, and I'd be in this studio working on, in this sort of acoustically treated room, with, really nice monitor speakers and a really nice studio computer. And it was like, wow, like this is what it feels like to be working on a proper setup, So yeah, definitely, I think mentors are very important, and because it gives you something to set your sights on, because otherwise you might not necessarily know which direction things are going to go in,
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about branding here. So, we all know you branded yourself as Jaytech, and that I don't think that's changed, right? It's pretty much Jaytech. That's your own brand, correct?
Yep.
Yep. Do you have any advice or tips, or just, got anything that you can really give to aspiring DJs in order to brand themselves properly? Do you feel like, because I'll tell you this, I have a lot of friends in this area that have tried to dabble into the DJ scene and everything, and it just seems like the way they're branding themselves, because remember, I have a marketing background, I've been doing this a long time, it just seems like the way they're branding themselves isn't right. They're kind of using, because some of them did get signed with small labels and things like that, so they're using the label to kind of brand themselves, but they don't have their own brand. I'm sure Anjunabeats probably told you, hey, listen, like, even though you're under our label, I want you to create your own brand. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or how did that work out?
So I think the first thing is, like, you just need to constantly be working on it. What's that website? It's like internetarchive.org or something. It's like this website you can go to, and you can type in your website's address, and you can see what it looked like in like 2009 or, in 2002.
Yeah. I forgot the name of it, but I know what you're talking about.
And I've done that a couple of times and gone to my website and gone, oh my God, I can't believe how like silly and like immature my branding looks, And so, yeah, I think it's, I have probably too many internet portals to my music. I've got Facebook, and I've got all this kind of social stuff. I've got my own website, which sort of requires constant, and I think it's really about just like making it a constantly evolving thing, because I think it's very rare that like an independent musician is going to go and dump like a bunch of money into having a complete branding package done for them with like logo, all this kind of stuff. And I think what is most important is that the whole perception that people have of you is constantly being updated and constantly evolving. Yeah. And because people also kind of forget what you used to look like. It's like looking at yourself on Facebook from like one of those horrid like 10 years ago memories that pops up when you're like, I see these photos of me, and I'm like, I'm this baby faced like drunk guy at a party somewhere, and it's like, oh wow, like that's what I used to look like,
And what was I doing, man?
Yeah. So it's a bit like that. It's like people don't really dwell on what you were before, and so I think it's really about chipping away at things. It's about finding what needs a fresh coat of paint. I was actually talking about this just with someone else just this morning.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Chobani yogurts actually.
Chobani. Yep.
I know it sounds silly, but it's like they have just given everything a fresh coat of paint, and now everyone's talking about how it's like it's making the yogurt taste more delicious, And so yeah, I think it's like you're never going to have all the answers of how your brand should look right at once. All you can do is just like keep finding ways to just keep it moving forward, and that momentum I think is really important with like the way that you're perceived. Momentum with your social media, all this kind of thing. And yeah, I think you've got to back it up with cool music with a cool product,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think having, I've had this logo for quite a long time, and I think that's kind of worked quite well. It's like a pretty simple, it's just my name in like bold text.
I like it. Yeah, it's definitely branded well. I like it.
But yeah, it's sort of, it gets plastered all over the place, and it gets put on flyers and things, and eventually it just becomes this household thing. So, but yeah, I did have, a good friend of mine, he was helping me with a lot of the branding stuff for a long time there. And I think it's just, it's just one of those things that evolves over time.
Yeah. And man, I wish I had my, my business partner here on the podcast as well. His name is Pete Peranzo. So we have this unique process in our company. Well, I wouldn't say it's unique, but this cool process, I think, in our company. And I think that every single entrepreneur, leader, musician, artist, everyone who's doing their own thing in the world should follow this. And it's called Kaizen. And what that is, it's basically a daily improvement. So you make an improvement every single day. And we have all of our employees do that. And I like what you said about branding, that you're never going to get it right in the beginning. You know what I mean? It's never going to be, in fact, probably in the beginning it was trash. I mean, when I looked at our company years ago, we're like, man, did we really make the logo like that? It looks bloody awful. Oh, wow. But now we're like, you see how we've evolved because we continuously made improvements. And I like what you said about there's trial and error, absolutely, with branding, but as long as you make improvements and evolve and adapt towards your audience, but you still stay true to who you are, that's what's gonna set you apart from your competition, and that's what's really gonna keep you in the market. Yeah.
I love that whole Kaizen idea. That's great. And something else.
Please use it. Kaizen.
Yeah. Something else I would say. I can't remember where I heard this. It was on another podcast or something. Yeah. But it's basically every time a business or a system triples in size, it needs to be reinvented, and that definitely applies to the music world as well. Like you can have success. You can have a lot of success, and it'll garner you new followers, and your listener base will increase, your user base will increase, everything will increase. Absolutely. And there will come a point where you hit a brick wall because whatever systems you're using to get that attention, to get that, that flow doesn't last forever. And you hit a point where you need to reinvent yourself. And this is the turning point in a lot of musicians' careers where they start to upset their fans. And it's a very controversial sort of question of like, should you be keeping your fans happy or should you be upsetting them? And it's this weird. Obviously, you don't want to purposefully upset anybody. But when you see an artist sort of perhaps do something kind of underground and they do it for a few years and then they come out with a new album that is a different speed or a different pace or has more vocals on it than you wanted or is more aimed for radio play than you like, you personally might be upset about it. But I mean, ultimately, it's probably the right path for this artist. So there is this kind of metamorphosis that needs to happen as you grow. And that's probably like one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give to my 20-year-old self is be prepared to throw everything that's working now out the window at some point and find something new.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. You think exactly alike. I definitely agree with that. And I wish Pete was on this podcast because he would have a lot to say about that. He's all about improvements. It doesn't matter who you are. I think if you're trying to definitely be somebody in this world, you can't stay comfortable. You can't just because eventually you're gonna plateau, right? You're always gonna plateau, and I think you have to think ahead and plan and know that things will change, just like you said, and understand. I mean, it's good to plan for the future in your career, but understand that there's going to be a lot of obstacles in the way, but I think those obstacles are going to lead you to evolving and changing and becoming better. And I think that's great, man. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people are going to really value that insight. And so this leads me to this next question. And I know we talked about it a little bit before, but I want to talk about your Positronic, your new venture, and your mentoring up and coming and aspiring DJs and very talented and skillful DJs. And I saw some things on YouTube about it that you're doing, but I really think like what we just talked about really leads into this question. So tell us a little bit about that new venture. I know we dabbled into it before, but I really want you to get into it here.
Well, it's a hugely different system from releasing music through the label in the UK. Mm-hmm. Because Positronic, now that we've set up the systems to release music, it's incredibly easy to release music. It's almost too easy to release music nowadays, which has its downfalls as well, because there are thousands of dance tracks coming out every month. And basically, we've gone from this sort of previous system of writing the track and having an A&R team discuss it, and then deciding to invest money into pressing it to a physical product and shipping it all around the world, mm-hmm. to bought on CD or vinyl by people in stores. We've gone from that to being able to write a track, render it out of your music software, and put it straight onto the market. And so we use an aggregator system called Label Engine, which I'm quite happy with. And we've been with them since day one. We've done a few physical products for some of the EP and album releases, but for the most part, it's digital. I tend to mix and master my own music for the most part nowadays, which I don't recommend people do, but I've been mixing and mastering for quite a long time, and I'm pretty good at sort of taking the ego out of the finished product. So it's worked pretty well for me. I'll write a track, I'll play it out a couple of times, I'll tweak the mixes and the masters and stuff, and then we just get the artwork done and we upload it into this system. And from that point, it just, a few weeks later, it comes out on Spotify, it comes out on Beatport, iTunes, everything. We can submit requests to have banner ads made on some of these stores, and if the track is deemed worthy by the powers that be of this this world, it can get included in Spotify playlists. It can get these big banners on the online portals, and so it's very easy to put this music out. And like I said, this label runs sort of alongside what I'm doing on Anjunabeats, and Anjunabeats, I would say like 90% of the time, Above and Beyond will play these tracks on their radio shows. And so just by sort of distributing it, I've got a promo list of all these DJs that I've, hung out with, played with, partied with over 10 years.
Wow.
And so we've got these tastemaker DJs that, we want to become this label that, people see in their promo inboxes and get to the virtual record boxes of DJs. And it's this kind of, it's this homegrown thing, and it's built upon the fan base that I sort of gained from being the opening DJ for Above and Beyond and releasing with Anjunabeats. It's built upon all of that, but it's sort of going off in a new direction where I can just do whatever I want. And that's kind of liberating, because when you release music with a big label, it takes up to 6 months to come out. And that's because there's a lot of work involved. And there's a lot of, and with a label like Anjunabeats, they have album releases, they have events around the world that they're constantly putting on, these big radio events and stuff like that. And you need consensus from sort of quite a few people. And so basically the setup that we've had for a while is that I send everything that I do to Anjunabeats. And I think kind of the most, I've used this word iconic so many times today on this show, but
iconic. That's a good word to use.
The most noticeable records, I think, sort of go to Anjunabeats. But then there's all this stuff that, goes down great in my sets, and some of these tracks on Positronic, I play them at every show, and right. There have been some really special moments. And so it's just been this way to have one stream of consciousness from my brain to people's ears with very little in between. So, it's unfiltered. It's often not as refined, I would say, as the big label stuff, because I don't have as many other professionals getting their ears on it and being like, oh, this could be different. This could be arranged a bit differently. But it's a little bit more honest as well. So it's kind of like the difference between being like a movie actor and having a talk show podcast. It's like,
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like, I think when you run your own talk show, like that's when people really get to know you. So it's a bit like that. I'm very lucky that I've been able to sort of, I think, exist in these two worlds. It's like I haven't had to choose this, like whether I'm part of a bigger label or my own thing, like a lot of people do. I'm just doing both. I was like, why not both?
So is Positronic, I know you're creating this new label, but is it also kind of a platform? I know you mentioned mentoring up and coming DJs, but are you offering like training? Are you training them? Are you providing? Are you offering like you're actually filming the training sessions so people on YouTube or all these other platforms can actually view it, or is it just music? Is it just like new singles and albums? It's more than that, right? It's a lot more than that.
So there's a few different ways that I do that. The main one that I did last year was in conjunction with Sonic Academy. And so they basically helped me sort of put together this start to finish progressive house tutorial of like how to make a Jaytech track.
Tutorial, yeah, exactly.
you know. And I tell everybody to sort of really try and absorb all the information in that as much as they can, and then completely forget about it, because no great record is written like with a step 1 to 10 start to finish process. It doesn't work like that. But the main purpose of it is to basically to show the sort of the kinds of procedures that I do for everything. And then we've also got like a Patreon page, which basically people I've got sort of a fan base on there, like people who sort of become like patrons of the Jaytech machine. So they get like extended podcasts, promos from the label, and sort of our higher contributors on there, they have access to my projects that I have. And so like certain tracks that came out and did particularly well,
that's cool.
People now have a way they can sort of show this support, and they can actually access like the Ableton project that I used, and it's got like a sort of audio commentary from me on like how these things work. So yeah, there's definitely
Awesome.
For the people who really want to get inside my head and see how I do all this stuff, like you can definitely, more than ever nowadays with artists, you can get under the hood and tinker around and see what's going on in there.
That's cool. No, I love it. I think that's great. I haven't seen too many DJs kind of doing that. Not that I know of.
Well, it was actually, so my business partner who I run Positronic with, the Patreon was his idea, and I really thank him for that, because he was, I've been doing this podcast for basically a decade, the music podcast, and he was like, well, here's a way to monetize it. You've got all these people out here who probably really want to, like contribute like a few bucks every month to show their appreciation for it, and get you paid for this, podcast that you're providing every month. And
Right.
I think anyone doing a podcast that's getting any kind of traction, I would recommend it. There are some talk show podcasts that do it, and they don't even sort of offer anything in return. They just get people just showing their support. But it's been a fun way to create like a sort of an inner circle of people. You know who your super fans are when they're chipping in 10, 20, $50 a month to the cause.
Absolutely. Especially when you're providing the value that you're providing, and it's good that you're talking. You mentioned monetization, and you can have you can create all this content and deliver it, and always be available for your fans and audience. But you definitely got to find ways to pay the bills. You got to find ways to bring in that revenue. But with that being said, you're providing value to these people. You're not just you know you have all these Facebook, what do they call them? When you go on Facebook, you see all these people that they say they made $1 million overnight and all this crap, right? I've been on some of these webinars. I'm just like, people are paying money for this. Like, how in the world? That provided no value to me whatsoever. But I definitely I see the value in Positronic. I love the tutorials. I love people can kind of get inside your head, and I think that itself is very valuable, and I definitely think it's worth more than a few bucks for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. You do see these people come online and they're like, I made $1 bazillion this month. I saw one post this week that was like somebody had made a fortune tapping into this niche market of air traffic control people. It was like, I made all this money like selling like humorous apparel and memorabilia and stuff to like with like air traffic control jokes to like the air traffic control community. And yeah, I think stuff like that. I love the idea of looking at this kind of stuff and applying it to what I'm doing. I don't really know how that works. You know what I mean? I don't know how helpful it is. But for me, it's definitely been about exploring a bunch of avenues, because you never know what's going to really hit, And so, yeah, I definitely ended up, I've had long periods of being my own management, being my own booking agent, being my own PR guy, I've sort of worn many hats in this career. And for me, I think, it was really, sort of opening up the streams that I had, doing things like mixing and mastering, having a label, doing these production tutorials, having people tip me every month for my podcast, working diligently on making sure that I've got some gigs in the works coming up. It's all very important, And I really like the idea of having just hedging your bets a little bit and making sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, because in a career as volatile as the music industry, you can't always expect a consistency of income. And so, yeah, I think I'm definitely in the last few years, I've been in this headspace of like, what else can I be? You know, like what else can I do that's going to be and even outside of music, you know, I love the idea of being many different things,
That's
you know,
great.
around the main thing that you do. So yeah.
That's cool, man. I think I think you're gonna do even bigger things than what you've already done. I mean, I can just kind of tell from on a business perspective, you are thinking not just like an artist, because a lot of artists, and I'm not even talking about just musicians. I'm talking about even, I'm talking about even actors and even athletes actually that they have this amazing skill set, right? But they don't know business. And that's actually hurt them. And with finances, right? Not knowing your finances can hurt you, and not knowing how to brand yourself can hurt you, and not knowing how to monetize your skills I mean that can hurt you as well. So I love what you're saying here. Just overall about we talked about branding, and monetizing your platform Positronic and your label, and really inspiring future DJs and artists, and also talking to your audience and your fans as well, giving back to them. We call it the give back approach. Actually, giving the give back approach with content, and you're monetizing that. So I think that's amazing, James. I think, like I said, you're going to do big things. So with all that being said, you kind of giving us a high level of your story, from you're being 14 and to now, and playing all over around the world. There had to be a lot of struggles that you went through and you had to overcome. What were some struggles, what are some of the largest struggles that you went through, and how really you overcame them? Because struggles I think in order for you to be successful and you to be a leader in anything that you're doing, you have to go through struggle. You have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the example I always use is Red Hot Chili Peppers, under the bridge. I'm pretty sure it's under a bridge. Anthony Kiedis having massive heroin issues, and that career defining song of his, being born from like the lowest point of his entire life. Yeah, I mean everyone gets burned. If you do business with a lot of people, at some point somebody's going to steal money from you, or somebody is going to treat you badly in a way that you just did not deserve in the slightest. And that can be a hard thing to let go of. And I've also seen people stop. I've seen that bring people to a halt. I think if that was going to happen to me, it would have happened by now, because I think there is great power in telling all of these forces trying to pull you down to just go get screwed, basically, and to be willing to do what you're passionate about, regardless of how many times you get totally knocked over.
Oh my God, yeah.
So, I mean, I think the first thing I touched on a little bit before, which is, I mean, I don't regret anything, but I wish I had known sooner that I would hit a point where all of my usual systems would stop working, because, it was suddenly like, after, and perhaps even, having the security of being part of a larger, well-oiled machine that is working so well.
Right.
I think when it comes to the point of having to figure it out yourself, it's like getting kicked out of the nest a little bit. It's like, okay, you've had this all sort of arranged for you up until a certain point. Now, if you want to keep doing it, you have to figure it out yourself. And that is just the way that the music industry is going, honestly, because, I read like Nile Rodgers' autobiography. That was a Christmas present from my auntie. Thanks, Auntie Wendy. I loved it. And basically, yeah, he's recently done, like obviously the big Get Lucky with Daft Punk. He was kind of the mastermind behind that.
Daft Punk,
but he also,
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but he also had this like long and illustrious career of like, of being part of Chic, this band, and like you read these stories, and it's like, we got together in the studio, started hammering out a bass line. Like I just did some like guitar riffs over the top. We like sang some stuff, like pressed it to vinyl, and it sold like it went like triple platinum and went and sold like 300 million physical copies. And then we went and bought ourselves sports cars, and we're just like rolling down the highway, living the life, So there was a time, and I think there was this sort of expectation that like in the music industry, you be creative and fabulous and you make the music yourself, and then everything else will be sort of arranged for you. Everything will be provided for you. Somebody else is going to come and pick you up and make that happen. And what's happened nowadays is that that's completely transformed, and that kind of thing happens to very, very few people.
Right.
It still does happen. But then, some of the biggest artists in electronic music today are people who gave away their music for free all the time and collected donations from people who wanted to give them instead. Grammatic, who's one of the kind of biggest electronic artists nowadays, does kind of like cool, kind of stoner, chill beats, and all this really fun music, lots of live instrumentation and stuff. He gave away his album on BitTorrent. He's like, go use these platforms that people have typically used to pirate people's music and just access my music on there. And so like people are just doing it all themselves, and so that I think is what's changed, And I think. For me, it was having that. One of the hardest struggles I had was sort of reinventing all these systems, and also I think when the whole music world moved from UK and Europe to North America, it transformed everything. It transformed the motivations of music. It transformed the music that people were giving all their attention to, and everyone who'd been relatively involved in the music world before that had to reinvent themselves, and sometimes it was really ugly. Sometimes people like very drastically change their sound overnight to sort of adapt to this new EDM culture that was rising in the USA. And that's something that I think everyone in our world, like the Anjunabeats world and the trance world, like some people did that to an extent. Some people dabbled in it. Some people reinvented themselves completely. I think a good example that I will cite here is Tritonal, actually, because they were sort of in the trance world, and then they are now sort of soaring high in the pop world, in this kind of poppy electronic music world. They'd be some good guys to get on the show, actually. This kind of having to be a phoenix rising from the ashes, and so that I think was. I
love
the
hearing
biggest
those stories.
Sometimes everything has to burn down, and like if you're not ready for that, it sucks. It's a really hard thing, because I think especially as an artist, like your music is so attached to your identity, and if your music stops having the impact that it used to, you feel like you're disappearing. You feel like your very identity is kind of not as prominent and as strong as it used to be. So. Yeah,
that's crazy. It's good to hear. It's good to hear the struggles sometimes. I hear a lot of the same struggles with people just in business, like CEOs. But it's cool to hear the actual struggles of a musician. You don't hear that too often.
Yeah. Obviously we want to be presenting the best sides of ourselves.
Absolutely.
That is the modern culture that we live in, that we want to project the highlight reel, as they say, which is great. Obviously, like the main reason you want to do that is because that's how you get business. You want people to see, you want people to see you at your best. But then you also have to be kind of graceful about dealing with the ugly sides of navigating through business, and that involves like not airing your dirty laundry in public. Like there have been a few times, people have like ripped us off or whatever, and this question has come out: should we be calling these people out? Should we be, should we be taking them down? And you have to be somewhat graceful about this stuff, and sort of just let it go and move on. Because these people are not worth the oxygen or the time.
Yeah,
they're not worth that energy.
I love it. I love you talking about being graceful and humble, and not, kind of turning the other cheek sometimes. I know it's tough, man. Trust me. I know it's hard. You get burned, and it's just a lot of. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of crazy people in the world. They're not all going to agree with you, and they all have their different ways of doing things. And unfortunately, we live in a really selfish society, especially when it comes down to money. I think it's tough. I think everyone goes through it, but and this leads me to one of my final questions. Actually, is aside from being graceful and humble in what you do as a DJ and producer, what tips would you really give to future musicians, I would say, in the scene, for them to get to the level where you're at? What 3 tips would you really give them?
I would say don't be afraid to make it all about you, because when you're in the public space and people you're up on this pedestal and people are looking at you for attention, mm-hmm. I think it's really good to have that self-confidence and to, do some things for yourself. I always thought I had to be so selfless and that I had to sort of keep everybody happy and provide this service to people. But what I realized is that, it's not a crime to do it for your own, satisfaction or to
absolutely
to make things work better for you. So I think, that's one thing I sort of realized is don't be afraid to be a little bit selfish sometimes, mm-hmm. and make it for you, because this is your experience. I would say keep your finances in order, like you were saying before, save your pennies, and make sure that you have a plan B or an exit strategy.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think the third thing I would say is it has to be fun. And if you're in survival mode, if you're singing for your supper, your music is gonna the quality is gonna be sacrificed. And the only way that you're gonna do your best work is if you're in this flow, and you have the freedom and the space to do things how you want. And so people get so, and once again, this is about we have to wear many hats nowadays. You mm-hmm. have to spend a lot of time administrating the career and orchestrating it and making it all happen. But I think when you're in that creative headspace, you just have to let all of that go, and you have to really remove any attachment to this idea of it needs to end up in this certain place. It needs to be this certain level of successful. The only way that you're going to write your best music is if you let all that go and just allow yourself to have a good time.
Yeah. That's awesome. And Steve Jobs says it, don't quote me exactly, but he says something like this in regards to being a leader, and being an entrepreneur, is the passion that you have is that's what's going to really take you past these struggles. Because you mentioned some struggles before, and when you're at your lowest point, you said having fun and being passionate and loving what you do is what's going to really is what's going to get you past that. And everyone's going to have their lows, but I think once you pass that, that's when you're really gonna see just a massive positive change in your career. And Steve Jobs and a lot of these other leaders around the world talk about that it's just really the passion and the fun that you have and what you do is what's going to get you past these really, really difficult times. So I think that's pretty amazing that you said that. But cool, man. We'll really appreciate it. So just kind of closing things out, James, I always ask the 3 hows. So how do you define failure? How do you define entrepreneurship? And how do you define success?
Great questions. I think failure is a discovery of the fact that reality is out of sync with your perception of it. I think you only ever know 50% of reality, and the other 50% is painfully revealed to you as you go along.
Wow.
So I think failure is discovery. It's discovery that your perception of who you are and what you think is going to work still requires more effort and more discovery. And failure is discovery. And it's, as I think we've really established in the last decade, it's the pathway to success. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship, I think, is about a willingness to do whatever it takes, and to think outside of the box. I saw a great talk on ADHD recently about how people with ADHD, people who struggle with focus and attention, are more likely to start their own businesses and their own startups.
I think I heard that somewhere too, actually.
Yeah. So I think entrepreneurship is really about thinking outside of the preconceived frameworks and structures that we have. And I think there are benefits to doing both, and so for me, it's always been chaos. It's always been reinventing the wheel. And having a willingness to just do whatever it takes, without necessarily knowing the way. And success, I think, is the definition of success is getting closer to yourself, whatever form that takes. So if you're writing music that you hate and you're making $10 million out of it,
it's not really success, is it?
No, it's not, So yeah, I think success is the truth. It's the truth of who you are. And, I think the closer that you get to that, the more fulfilled you feel.
That's awesome, man. Oh, that was a first for all those three answers. I love it. I don't like it when kind of the people answer the same way, but especially the failure piece. I think that's pretty cool to think about. It's really discovering yourself. If everything's working perfectly for you, how are you really going to find yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love it, man. That's amazing stuff. So James, where can everyone find you, man? Your podcast, your website, social media.
I can totally do my radio voice bit here because I've said it about a million times. But you can subscribe to my show anytime as a podcast over at jaytechmusic.com or over at soundcloud.com/jaytechmusic. You can give me some internet love at facebook.com/jaytechofficial. Instagram, jaytechmusic, Twitter, jaytechmusic. Just hit me up on any of those. I may even answer. I'm getting better at that now at actually responding to people. So yeah, I'm always open to interesting ideas, interesting opportunities, and if anyone even just needs some advice on something that they're trying to figure out with their music, hit me up.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, James, Jimbo, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Truly an honor you taking the time out of your crazy schedule to be with me today. And I know you got a show tonight in Portland, Oregon. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Cool. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. This is Michael Giorgio, your host on Tales from the Pros. And until next time, thanks, guys. Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for watching Tales from the Pros. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also follow our social media. There are links somewhere around here. But we really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for all the support. And I'm going to be giving you awesome content continuously. And we look forward to seeing you soon.